Welcome back to the SENWA studio out here at Optus Stadium. Scotty Waters was a star in Western Australia's most famous under-18 team. He was a member of West Coast's first grand final team. He was a premiership coach at Subiaco. He was an AFL coach at St Kilda. He joins us on the show. Scotty, welcome.
Morning, Duff. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. I'm trying to be an optimist today, and I'm trying to take a glass half full approach with West Coast. So looking at this glass half full as opposed to glass half empty or broken, what can you see at West Coast that maybe represents a green shoot going forward?
Well, look, I think there's a few things. You know, we're again, I said this 2 or 3 weeks ago. If the expectations are that we expect the win-loss category to just magically shift to the positive, that is not going to happen. This is going to take time. That list needs an incredible amount of work. But we're seeing some younger inside midfielders starting to emerge. You know, I actually don't mind that we've had Harley, Reid spending time at half-back, because I think it's given the opportunity to some other inside mids. So Elijah Hewitt's done some great work. So there's some things that I like. I like that they're backing in some young key forwards as well. One of the challenges is obviously where is Oscar Allen at as far goes as his future. That's going to be an ongoing conversation, but they don't seem to be taking a backward step as far as blooding youngsters and getting time into the right level of emerging talent. So let's just keep watching that talent grow. Look to see improvement in those younger players. If we focus on that, then I think there'll be some good things to enjoy over the course of this year.
So if you were the West Coast Eagles, and we think West Coast are open to the idea of letting Oscar go, provided the compensation pick is band one compensation, which would put them right at the top end of the first round of the draft, would you continue to play Oscar Allen in defence and help support Jeremy McGovern?
I would play him where it best suits the team and suits the team long term. So at times I think that's going to be in the defence, but at times I would still play him as a forward as well. The thing that you want, look, whether Oscar stays or goes, we're going to find that out towards the end of the year. But you still want Oscar Allen playing his best football right now. And every individual, they have to play their best football within what is best for the team at the right time. So it's going to be a balancing act. I'm not one that says he should just play back for the remainder of the year or he should just play forward. I think we have to manage that. But I'd always be looking at the opportunity for our younger developing forwards and what that means. And at the same time, you know, he started as a defender. So we know he can play both ends, and an opportunity for him to get back into some good form as a defender it's not the first time we've seen key forwards do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. I think at the other end too, and this plays into that whole situation with how they manage Oscar, is that two of the younger players that are actually showing quite a bit, I think, are Jack Williams and Archie Reid, who are tall forwards.
Reid in particular, there's a lot to like, and again, let's get 6 to 12 games where they actually own the forward line, and let's see how far they come along. I mean, often we look at younger players and we're wanting them to come along, but you've got to create the vacuum of opportunity, and particularly with forwards. You know, we've seen it happen so often where, you know, I had young forwards coming through playing alongside Nick Reid at St Kilda, and in some ways, when Nick was there, it actually curtailed their development. And then there were weeks where Nick Reid was injured, and all of a sudden that young key forward they got more opportunity. There was more of the ball kicked at them. And they knew that they were the ones that needed to really step up as a primary target. And we saw different things come from that young player. So it's never as dark as it seems, Duff. I actually think Reid in particular, there's a lot to like about him. I think we give him opportunity.
Yeah, good point. In the game against Hawthorn, we saw both sides of Harley Reid. There was the needless free kicks, a couple of dump kicks. It appeared to be a lack of care with the way he was going about what he did with the ball. And then suddenly after half-time, you see good Harley, and he ends up with more clearances than any other teammate. He kicks 2 goals from half chances and actually becomes a valuable contributor to the team after half-time. Putting your coach's experience hat on, how do you manage a young talent like that is A, explosive and brilliant and has a lot to offer, but also B, is wayward and can lose his way on field very quickly?
I think you have to acknowledge it's like being a parent with young kids or a teacher with young kids in a classroom. You're going to get some ups and downs. They're not perfect. They're actually developing. They're developing their game and they're developing the understanding of how to impact. So if you expect perfection from a second year player, you're not going to get it. You're going to get inconsistency, and inconsistency for Harley. There's times when he's got a natural instinct. He is a competitor. You can see that in the way that he plays. And at times you look at it and you go, that's right on the edge of what's acceptable, and we don't want to coach that out of him. And then there's times at the moment where it appears distracted, like he's lost focus, and he does things that are at the wrong time for the team. They're going to have to wear a little bit of that over the next 6, 12, 18 months because he's still working out that edge. He needs some assistant coaches that are really constantly talking to him about when is the right time to play right up alongside it and on top of that edge, and when is the time to back off. So I think you've got a number one draft pick that has been a dominant player throughout all of their junior football and had a great year last year. Balancing individual performance against what's best for the team at the right time, that's going to be an ongoing conversation. Coaches just need to stay really close to him and keep talking him through that. He's going to get it right sometimes, Duff, and he's still going to get it wrong as well.
It was interesting watching after half-time on the weekend because even though Elijah Hewitt wasn't as dominant as he was after half-time against Essendon the previous week, there were times when Hewitt and Reid both got on the move around stoppages, and suddenly West Coast actually started to look dangerous at the contest against a team that we think will be in and around the top 4 at the end of the season. And to me, there were times when it looked a little bit exciting for the Eagles.
I agree. And, the names that you've mentioned, you go back 3 or 4 weeks and they weren't even in the inside midfield mix. So let's just see how much they can grow. And I think the opportunity for a Harley to come back and play even, I guess, a more dominant role in the inside mid and spend more time in there, I think that'll emerge over the rest of the season. But there is some things to watch. And again, if you're a West Coast supporter and you're feeling like, man, this is going to be a long season, just have a really good close look at some of the young players that are starting to show some signs and get your enjoyment from watching their growth. And that is the number one way we should measure the West Coast coaching staff this year. The only thing I'd like to see from the West Coast coaches, and I reckon we'll see it at some point, hopefully, is Minnie McWalter so conservative that he won't pick a fight, or will he pick a fight at the right time? Because there's some outside clubs that are certainly looking at West Coast as a shopping centre of opportunity. And I'm just going to be interesting to see when we see McWalter go from playing a very conservative straight line at the moment, which I think is the right time, but when we actually see him draw the line in the sand with some opposing clubs and how he does it, that's going to be fascinating to watch. Yeah,
that's a really good call. Just on the game on the weekend, when Sam Mitchell shifts Tom Barras forward after three-quarter time, and Tom Barras never went forward even on his holidays. Did you view that as strange? Did you view that as a coach just experimenting, or did you view that as a tad disrespectful? Like, if you'd been coaching against him on that day, how would you have seen it?
Look, you're always guessing, right? Because you don't know the ultimate reason. But if I was to guess, and knowing Sam reasonably well and watching his journey, Sam is bordering on cocky. As a coach, it's one of his great strengths. And the opportunity to send Barras as a former West Coast player who they've poached and have him almost lining up alongside Oscar Allen, who they want to poach, and that was a talking point for me. So if I was guessing, Duff, that was antagonistic, it was deliberate, and it's one that the West Coast Eagles should keep in their back pocket and reload that and send it back to them at another time. But I thought it was. I didn't like it, but that's part of what it is. But there'll come a time when the shoe will be on the other foot, and West Coast will have their opportunity.
Yep, as Mick Malthouse, your former coach, used to say, sometimes you're a windscreen, sometimes you're a bug. Hopefully at some point West Coast gets to be the windscreen. Hey, Fremantle versus Adelaide, that's the Dockers brand, isn't it? That's the balance between attack, defence, that's the level of intensity, that's the Fremantle method that can take them somewhere.
Yeah, you could see in the first 5 minutes of the game when they shut down a lot of the short option kicking from Adelaide that the heat had been on during the week. They'd been refocused around what good defence looks like, and even some agitation at training and some challenge from Justin Longmuir in the way that he was running the sessions and being probably a bit more animated. It flowed through, and that was you could see it. First 5 minutes, it was night and day. There's a few other things that I thought were fantastic too. I actually liked the addition of Wagner going into the middle and playing a role. He's got good pace, and he plays more of a pressure type role as a midfielder. I thought that just gave him a slightly different edge in the middle of the field, which I thought was really important. Brayshaw, I thought we saw the absolute best of Brayshaw. I've been semi-critical. I've never doubted that he's a really good player. I've just had question marks over how good. That performance was a great performance. There's not many mids that can go win the ball inside and get the ball outside, and he did that extremely well. Little question mark, Duff, remains for me on the intensity and fitness of Sean Darcy and just where he sits in the mix at the moment. I don't think he's at this stage operating at his absolute best, so that's an opportunity for Fremantle to look at over the next few weeks.
You're like a DIY interview at the moment, Scotty, because I was going to ask you about Wagner. You've already answered that one, and you've half answered the Darcy question. If you were coaching them this weekend and Jackson comes back, what would be the split, Darcy-Jackson in the ruck?
Well, obviously, Jackson's the more mobile. You're always going to have that. So if you're playing the dual combination, you're really looking at, it's got to be 60-70% Darcy doing what he does best. And that's the ruck work. But he's got to up his energy level. He's got to up there was a couple of contests where he looked quite passive and just looked like he didn't have the tank or the repeat effort strength to really get involved. Now we've got to cut him a little bit of slack. He's coming back from time away from the game. But I would think he's at 60%, maybe 70% of the primary ruck duties, and we get Jackson being mobile. But it all just depends on where Darcy is at the moment, because his best footy is what they've got to get him back to. He's not quite there yet, but we've got a little bit of time to work him into it.
You've been a coach. You understand how to manage people. You would have seen the Ross Lyon stuff on the boundary in the first quarter with Garcia at St Kilda, and then the subbing out of him early, and then the defence of it at the press conference later. How careful do you have to be with a young player when there's a demonstrative, if you like, rebuke for that player in a public space? Was it something you would have done, or you'd have waited till a more private location before you gave direct feedback like that?
I think you've got to know your player, and obviously sometimes you've got a young player who's also quite a mature player that wants to get really direct feedback and can handle it. So it's knowing your audience. That's the first thing. Having said that, there's probably very few times when I would have made a spectacle of a younger player in such a public space. I don't think it was great coaching at all. I think it was born out of frustration from Ross, and when you act out of frustration, you make probably more selfish decisions than decisions that are really in the best interest of the player. The comments around he gets to coach action and I guess not feelings, well, that's bullshit. You actually half of coaching. Yes, there's a strategic, there's a tactical side, and there's certain actions that need to be employed, and you need to actually stay very firm to as a coach. But you're dealing with an athlete's mindset and attitude and how they feel every single step of the way. Don't tell me there is not an athlete in the world that doesn't need to feel safe, supported, still challenged. Absolutely, there's time to really be very direct with the player as well, but they need to know that you've got their back as well. And I thought it was a really strange, frustrated way that Ross communicated, which flowed through to the press conference, which, it was sort of typical diversionary tactics from Ross when things aren't going well. Rowan Connolly's article this week, Duff, I thought summed it up perfectly. So if anyone hasn't read that one, have a look. But younger player, certainly could support them in a better way, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, and it is an interesting one. I've sat in a coach's box before during an AFL game. I can see how arced up the whole environment is. I understand how supercharged coaches get, but I think probably to paraphrase what you were saying, your job is to get the best out of them and not necessarily to impose yourself on them. And you get the feeling that Ross was doing the latter, not the former, when he went Garcia on the bench.
Well, Ross had been around for a long time, and he would have known the stage that he picked.
Yeah.
And I think it was more about how Ross looked, and even think about the commentary around what's occurred, Duff. And you've got some people coming out and say, "Oh, it's great to see, tough Ross back." Well, I think that's just a load of rubbish, to be honest. The most important thing is how are we getting the best out of that particular player? And I think it's very questionable that action was getting the best out of a 16-game young player who's trying to build his own game.
Scotty, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. You always talk a lot of sense, and look forward to speaking to you again in the very near future.
Good on you, Duff. Catch up soon, mate.
Scotty Waters there, of course, star at the West Coast Eagles, a star coach at Subiaco, AFL coach at St Kilda as well. Of course, he inherited the Saints not long after Ross Lyon had that run between 2007 and 2011, and a wise man when it comes to footy. We'll take a break and be back with more.